Europe is bracing for a gas crisis. Russia is turning off gas supplies to the region, making good on its threat to halt deliveries to so-called unfriendly countries.
The Kremlin failed once again in his attempt to sow division among member states. The era of Russian fossil fuel in Europe is coming to an end. Europe is moving forward on energy issues. Thank you very much.
Bulgaria calls the move a gross violation of their contract. It says it will not meet any demand that falls outside the contract. Listen in.
Our categorical stance is that Bulgaria will not meet any demand that falls outside its contract. We have a contract and will adhere to it, and that is what we have to say. Nobody can blackmail Bulgaria, regardless of what power they think they have.
And on the other hand, Poland says it will not succumb to Russian pressure. The Prime Minister has said Poland has become totally independent from Russia. He also called on other EU countries to do the same.
As
of today, when Russia stopped gas deliveries to Poland, we are no longer dependent on Russia in any respect. It was naive to believe that Russia would not use gas to blackmail us. It has been doing so for years.
Blackmail, gross violation. These are some of the big words used by the European Union. But the bloc is still very much dependent on Russian gas. Reports suggest that 4 European gas buyers have already made ruble payments to Russia. As many as 10 companies have already opened the accounts at Gazprom Bank. That is a step that is required to meet Russia's payment demands. Meanwhile, Ukraine has accused Russia of stirring a global price crisis. Listen in.
Росія намагається спровокувати глобальну цінову кризу, щоб почався хаос на усіх базових ринках і особливо на продовольчому. Український експорт допоможе стабілізувати ринки. Отже, це вигідно не тільки нам, а усім європейцям.
For more on this, joining us on the broadcast is Oleksiy Pasyuk. He is an energy expert at the CEE Bankwatch Network. Thanks very much, Oleksiy, for being here with us. This is a slippery slope, like we have been telling our viewers all throughout. What do you make of these latest statements coming in? Ukraine has accused Russia of stirring a global price crisis. The European Union is calling Russia's moves blackmail. How do you assess Russia's strategy as of now and the way it has tried to use its oil supplies as a tool to build pressure on the West?
Yeah, good evening. Well, I think we see it's kind of in multiple sides, because while showing these quotes, you refer to Ukraine talking more about the food prices, right? Because the war basically blocked the supply of grain and oil from Ukraine and Russia itself. But of course, it's also related, or it's more related to energy. The thing is that there is a very long history between Europe and Russia. Even since Soviet Union and the Cold War, Russia was bringing oil and gas to Europe, also to Western Europe. But in the last 2 decades, the gas wars was kind of a common story, mostly between Russia and Ukraine, but it was always impacting the entire Europe because main pipelines from Russia to Europe were going through Ukraine. So it's, I think the situation is a bit unusual because in Europe itself, it's a big discussion whether to stop buying gas and other fossil fuel from Europe as a response to the brutal war which Russia started in Ukraine. And there is overall expectation that instead of world kind of joining military and joining Ukraine, it should put economical pressure and expect actually the same steps from countries around the globe, including India, which is buying oil. But Europe was resistant. I mean, some of the key European players who are very dependent on gas wanted to make it slow and to take some time and kind of leave this cut of gas for upcoming years. Now, Russia is really provoking Europe to speed it up. And I don't think it came exactly as a surprise. And Europe have prepared some common responses in terms of being ready to support members each other. So one neighbor would be helping others. But I think it's additional pressure on Europe to cut on gas use altogether. And of course, the question is how to do that. I would say there are a couple of different ways how Europe can go around. Of course, there is a possibility to have some technical responses, right? Europe was already building possibilities to bring gas from other countries by LNG, by liquefied gas, and so you can carry it by boat right through the sea. There is also a lot of work done into interleague countries between each other to have a bigger flow. However, all these steps require big investment. It also requires time, but also it means a long payback. And for Europe, it's very difficult because it's on the way to phase out fossil fuel altogether. Right. And now investing into new gas infrastructure will be counterproductive. I mean, you then need to run for 20 years to pay it back. So Europe really have to focus on cutting consumption.
Does this not leave the European Union in a rather embarrassing position when there are reports also emerging of how there are these tankers at Russian ports headed to quote-unquote unknown destinations? Europe reportedly is discreetly buying Russian oil because it cannot be seen as doing away with what it's preaching at this point to the world to cut down on Russian oil imports.
Yes, I think that partly it's fair to say because there are lots of decisions on buying that stuff was done, I mean, before the war started. It now seems like to be the age, but it's just in February, right, the end of February when the war started to this scale. And I think European governments are under pressure to have a stricter control. And in fact, the whole story, which is currently unfolding with this idea to pay in Russian rubles, is Russian attempts to bypass sanctions. So, of course, there is a constant process of sanctions being introduced and countries under sanctions trying to kind of find the way out of it. So I think it will be a process where Europe, US or whatever country which is trying to support Ukraine in this war by economic sanctions would need to follow this new kind of gaps which are opening.
All right, Oleksiy Pasyuk, thanks very much for joining us on the broadcast and sharing those perspectives. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.